First, vielen Dank and viele Grüße to Hanno and Gunther and Hardy Dreyer and all of my Kollegen in Deutschland. I know how hard you have all worked to put this together. It's not easy. And maybe this is a sign that we are still very early in the development of the virtual world. What I want to talk to you about today is how serious the virtual world has become. We tend to think of virtual worlds as video games, but there are two things that argue against that, and one is the emergence of places like Second Life, and the other is the emergence of serious things within video games. So most of my talk is about serious things in video games and how those serious things will affect the real world. But we'll have a brief pause in the presentation as we switch from one set of slides to another. And during that time, I will talk to you about what we are doing in Second Life here at Indiana University. And I'll talk a little bit about what these kinds of serious simulations mean for our work in virtual worlds, okay? So I do have a lot of slides, but I don't talk about all of them. So I'll talk about a subset of things. But first, let me start with a tale of corrupted blood. And I'll just read this for you. Deep within the dungeon of Zul'Gurub lurks Hakar, the soul flayer, the blood god of the trolls. Those who merely touch Hakar become infected by the foul and deadly disease of the corrupted blood. Worse, they become carriers of his foul plague and infect all those near them. On a late summer day in 2005, a team of hearty adventurers descended into Zul'Gurub to do battle with Hakar. Only a few returned. But it would have been better had they not, for they brought with them the corrupted blood, and they thereby unleashed the most deadly plague in the history of Azeroth. So, this slide here is an image from World of Warcraft. The previous tale that I just told happened in World of Warcraft. It's a real thing that happened. And in this image, you see skeletons, you see people running away, and you see orange bursts exploding on people's characters. What's going on here is that some adventurers went into a dungeon where they got a spell effect on them, and this spell effect had the property of jumping from one character to another. And within the context of that dungeon, it was a minor thing, but because the people in the dungeon were very high level. But once you came out of the dungeon, this disease would jump from you to much lower level characters, and it would be enough to kill them. And so the skeletons you see are characters who died because they got this disease. And the exploding orange is the effect of the disease on some other characters who are also about to die. This image is from a place called the Auction House in World of Warcraft, and it's a pretty popular public thing. You might compare it to a bank or a strip mall or an Einkaufszentrum. And and so it's normally filled with lots of people, and here everyone's dying and running away, and so it's really quite a panic. Now, at this level, this is a funny story from a video game. Ha ha ha, who cares? But you might be surprised to know that this episode has been written up by prestigious, traditional, serious doctors as an incident of disease transmission. And you might stop and say that that's insane. Who would look into a video game and say that they had found anything serious about disease at all? Like your first objection might be, well, in a video game nobody really dies, right? So how can how can the spread of a plague in a video game be considered an example of anything real? And I would respond to you by saying, okay, there are two things about a disease. One thing is its biological properties, but the other part of a disease is its sociological properties. And this is what you could study in a virtual world, how the disease transfers from one human to another. And in fact, I would claim that there's no better place to study these sorts of events than in virtual worlds. And so that's sort of a theme throughout this entire talk, in different areas and in different ways. My basic message is that just because it's a fantasy and just because it's a play environment, something like World of Warcraft does contain a genuine human society, and very serious human things happen within it. What this has led me to focus on is the idea of using virtual worlds as petri dishes, as a place to do social science experimental work. And so it's descriptively interesting to me that virtual worlds have serious things in them. But to me, it's also interesting from a methodological perspective. We can do things, we can do science in virtual worlds that we can't do anywhere else, and that's where I'm focusing most of my efforts. Okay, so that's the overarching theme. Let me back up and share some data about how video games have been changing. My view is that the whole area of video games has been transformed into more of a world entertainment product than a single-person entertainment product. In the United States, for example, for every person who's a golfer, there are 4 gamers. The average age of video gamers is now 33, and it's going up by about 1 year every year. Most online gamers are middle-aged females. Our stereotype is that, most gamers, and especially online gamers, are 16 years old, they're boys, they have pimples on their face, they don't talk to girls, they stay in their mother's basement, and they eat pizza and drink soda, and that's all they do. But this is not true. The vast majority of online gaming, at least in the United States, is casual games being played by, as it says here, women who are middle-aged. This has shown up in several surveys. Now, the micro effects of games are still poorly understood. No one in the industry really understands why games are so attractive to people. There's a lot of what I would call weak theory, but nothing really grounded in psychophysiological theories of brain functioning, for example. So we don't really understand what games do, but they are growing very, very rapidly. They're being used a lot more, and the technology behind them is really changing. While this is happening, games are becoming more and more social. It started out that a game was like a book or a movie. You purchased the book or the movie and you just read it yourself. And so you would buy a game and you would just read it yourself. But now games are becoming more social. First of all, there's online competitive gaming. So it started out that you would play a game against someone else online. And then the next step was you started to play with other people. So you and someone else would get together to try and defeat some common enemy. What's happening now is that we're taking our offline social networks and going online with them to game. So in my life, I have a bunch of people that I play games with, and when a new video game comes out, we all go in and we play it together. So what's happening is the whole idea of gaming is becoming much more social.